Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting of February 16th, 2022. And the first order of business is to confirm that the meeting minutes and the meeting information package has in fact been posted.
The meeting agenda.
Isn't that what I said?
No, minutes and packet.
Minutes? Wow, what a start. The agenda has been posted as well as the meeting information. Tonight, Beth Bonner and Steve Rudd are not present. Otherwise, all planning commissioners are here and ready for action. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could get each of us to stand, remove hats. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This brings us to the first public comment period of the night. If a person wants to make a comment during this portion of the agenda, it's limited to matters that are on the agenda for action. Commenters would have up to 5 minutes to speak. And I believe that each of the agenda items tonight are in fact public hearing and with... That's right. So, if the item is listed as a public hearing, you would have the opportunity to speak at that time as well. Does anybody in the audience wish to be heard on any of the agenda items on today's agenda? If anyone in the virtual audience would like to be heard on this matter, on any of these matters, please call in. The number is 702-589-9629, and there's a slight delay, so we'll wait 30 seconds. Hearing no comments, we will close that initial public comment period.
If you could please leave it open, I have public comments to read.
My apologies, I should have asked. Thank you.
Hi, this is Matthew Long at 1505 Mendota Drive. I am fine with the accessory building / pool to be put in the front yard at 1504 Mendota Drive. Please approve the listed variance. Best regards, Matthew Long. The second public comment is I live at 1502 Mendota Drive. Here are my comments. 1, no objection for the pool and pool house. However, we prefer landscaping around the pool house and pool to help to improve the curb appeal. 2, the property should have a driveway with a hot top or concrete. The dust in this area contains asbestos. 3, heavy use of trucks, ? Some concern about noise pollution. 4, desert-friendly palm trees / ground cover would be nice. Vahan V. Basmajian, 1502 Mendota Drive.
Is that it for the comments this period?
Yes, no more comments.
Thank you. With that, we'll in fact close that the initial public comment period, which brings us to the first item on the agenda, which is the election of officers. And the officers in question would be the chairman and the vice chairman. I don't know if you all read the note that due to term limitation, My term within the Planning Commission will expire on the 9th of November of this year. Just as a note, and that if, well, you've read the rest of it, if you were to see fit to have me be the chairman, then the vice chair would have to, of course, chair the last two meetings of the year. With that, I'd like to open the floor to nominations. Does anyone want to place a nomination?
I'll nominate Paul Matuska as chair. Let him finish out his term.
Do we have any more nominations for chair? All right. I have a nomination for vice chair. Would like to stay with Nate Lassoff, if he'd be willing to accept. Does anyone else have nominations for vice chair?
I'll nominate Nat.
All right. Well, since we only have one nomination for each of those positions, it looks like I will continue on as chairperson by acclamation, and Nate will continue as vice chairman by acclamation.
No, he just nominated somebody else, so we have to take a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you say for chair?
No. I misunderstood. I thought we were doing
A vote?
the vice chair, so.
We were, and who did you nominate? Okay, so he had been nominated already.
Oh, I thought you nominated Mr. DeTeresa.
No.
Nate. All right, so with that, per the note, it looks like we don't actually take a vote, just simply
If
move
there are no
forward.
other nominations, correct.
And just to give everyone a chance, any additional nominations? Well, thank you. I'd be happy to continue on as chair. I appreciate that. Nate, welcome back to the vice chair position. Which brings us to the second order of business, approval of the minutes of the January 19th, 2022 regular meeting. Does anyone have any comments on the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that motion. Any comments? Hearing none, I would, right. Hearing none, I would call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And the minutes stand as recorded. This brings us to agenda item number 3 for possible action. This is item V-21-651, applicant Aaron Meadow, 376 Laurel Drive. It's a request for approval of an extension of time for a variance per section 11-35-8 of the city code. Could we have the staff report, please?
Certainly. Whenever a variance is granted by the Planning Commission, the city code requires that work begin on the project within 180 days of approval. The Meadows were granted a variance by the Planning Commission for the property at 376 Laurel Drive on April 21st last year to allow a combined side setback of 9.35 feet, where 15 feet is required for additions on both sides of the existing home. The Meadows are seeking a 180-day variance extension as they continue to address outstanding items in the application review process. And the staff report concludes with possible motions to use for either approval or denial of the request, and the Meadows have provided their information explaining the reasons for the delay.
Very good. Does the applicant wish to be heard on this matter?
Sure.
Okay, very good. Please stand, state your name for the record.
Aaron Meadow. And I just wanted to ask if you guys can give me extension. It did take a long time to get through the building department and get any type of initial comments. And then it also did not help that I submitted the wrong set of prints, and I submitted an old revision, and that slowed things down as well. So my apologies, but we're trying to go as fast as we can.
Any questions for the applicant? And I recognize that I neglected to ask if there were any questions for city staff on this. Hearing none, thank you.
Thank
you. Well, this is not a public hearing, and so let's bring this back to the Planning Commission for consideration and potentially a motion. Anyone have any comments or thoughts they'd like to express?
Unless anybody has comments, I don't have any. I'd make a motion to approve the extension of V21-651 by 180 days to August 15th, 2022, subject to the original conditions of approval based on compliance with the findings of Section 1135(8) of the City Code.
I'd second that motion. Any comments at all at this point? Hearing none, we'll bring it to the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Meadow.
Thank you.
All right. Brings us to agenda item number 4 for possible action. Give me a moment to catch up here. This is item V-22-656, Brian Graham, 1504 Mendota Drive. It's a public hearing on an application for variance in the R1-80 single-family residential zone to permit an accessory building in the front yard, whereas section 11-20 of the city code prohibits accessory buildings within the front yard. Could we have the staff report, please?
Yes. The applicant is constructing a home on the property and chose to place the home far back on the lot, which is not necessarily uncommon for the large lots in this subdivision known as B Hill. The pool will be in front of the house, and the applicant would like to have a pool house in that area as well, which requires a variance. The code prohibits accessory structures in a front yard, which is defined in our code as the entire area in front of the house. And in this case, the pool house will still be approximately 300 feet back from the front property line, as the lot is approximately 400 feet deep. The staff report goes through the 5 criteria that must be met in order for the Planning Commission to consider approval of a variance. And the report does reference that in this particular neighborhood, with these very large and very deep lots, having accessory buildings in front of the home is those have been approved in the past. The staff report concludes with alternate findings that could be used for approval or denial. If for approval, the 2 recommended conditions are: 1, that the variance approval is based on the plans and information submitted and discussed as part of the variance request, and the variance shall not apply to deviations to the plans if the scope of the variance is expanded beyond that shown on the plans and submitted information. And 2, the accessory building shall not be used as or converted to a dwelling or rental unit. And the report concludes with alternate motions the committee could use to either approve or deny the request.
Very good. Thank you, Susan. Does anyone have questions of staff? Hearing none, is the applicant here?
Yes, sir.
And would you like to be heard on this? Please step forward, state your name for the record.
My name is Brian Graham. I appreciate your guys' time here. Any questions, feel free to ask. My wife can't make it tonight, but she appreciates your time also. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. I do have a question. Will will the pool, wherever it's located, be required to have a fence around it? And if so, what kind of fence are you considering?
We're gonna do, yes, it's required. We're doing a wrought iron fence around it. Also utilizing the building or the utility pool shed as part of the fence.
Okay. Was there anything on the property that prevented you from putting the pool in what would be the backyard?
Yes, sir. The house is recessed all the way to the back of the property. Where the house exists, it's pretty much two giant granite boulders. And I helped with the excavation of it, and pretty much where the house sits is as far down as we could get it, the whole top of the hill, because of these two massive boulders that are up there. The neighbor's pool got dug about 10 years ago, I believe, and he could only dig it down about 3 feet. I think the deepest spot might be 4 because of this giant vein that runs through there. So where we could position everything, the front of the house it had one boulder that we could bust up, but where the house is located and behind it's on the property line, and it's undiggable.
So if I understand correctly, had you moved the house forward, you would have had these big boulders behind the house where a pool might have gone, and it would have been very, very difficult to excavate, is what I'm understanding?
Yes, sir.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Wait, let's just see if anyone else has questions for you. Does anyone else have questions of the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, Tammy, I didn't memorize the neighbor's comment, but could you address some of those concerns that he had?
Are you asking the applicant? Okay.
So Vahan, first thing he was worried about is the dust, because of our driveway right now is obviously gravel. And at this time, we're not gonna put the concrete in because of the construction equipment. The heavy truck use is because of construction. And he has done an amazing landscape on his property, and I think he just wants to continue the look of the neighborhood, which I've talked to him about our idea of landscape. And also the curb appeal of the pool and the building. I think on how we do the landscaping, he'll be satisfied. So, and yep, that covers it all. And we are doing concrete, so we'll have a compacted driveway. So.
Thank you for that.
If I could just make sure I understood, so you are planning some kind of landscaping that would be above ground some, so that it might diminish the height of the pool shed? Is that kind of what his concern was?
No, Vahan's from Libya, and so his idea of a desert landscape is palm trees and drought-resistant plants. We're more entitled to do Mojave or desert landscape for this area. I think he just wants, because right now it's just rock and construction equipment everywhere. So he just envisions what he has carrying over and not just us leaving it. So yeah, I'll talk to him again, but I'm pretty sure he'll be happy for what we're gonna do.
Okay, so there will be landscaping, in other words.
Yes, sir, drought resistant.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, sir. Or I'm sorry, any other questions of the applicant? Tom?
Where are you at in the stage of construction?
We just started painting, and the stucco is about to start.
So the process of construction started when?
We broke ground, I believe, the 1st of June.
Okay, I guess what I'm puzzled at a little bit is why the pool is coming into question at this stage.
I guess it's just the process that the steps that we've taken. we broke ground and then got the house set up and on its way, and then now it's the pool's turn.
Thank you.
Yep.
I wonder if that wouldn't be a question for city staff. Okay, we have another question. Please, Mr. Bianski.
Yeah, in your application, you indicated part of your justification was that the elevation from the pool to the house, there was some grade to it. I didn't see in the plans, maybe I'm missing it, but what approximately is that grade elevation difference between the pad of the house and the pool?
I believe it's between 8 to 10 feet of the slope.
Okay. And let me make sure something else. Not sure I can read it, 30 feet. Looks like it's about 30 feet then from the house to the shed or to the pool.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's about right. I noticed also in the conditions, of course, that the staff has, which is appropriate for accessory building, that this cannot be a living dwelling or a rental unit.
Correct.
But I'm a little, I'm kind of curious why the plan shows it as a shed, the whole area, but when you look at the actual plan for the building, it clearly does not look like it's at all a shed. It looks like only a portion of it is a shed. So I'm a little, it smacks like it's heading down the path of being a livable area.
The main focus of this structure was safety, so people aren't going back and forth to the house because of the restroom. Utilities, the rental I live in, I don't know how many times they've replaced all the pool pump, because everything for the pool and the heater is going to be in there. We've had issues with our rental because of the sun baking all the pool equipment, and so I want to put everything inside. I want the bathroom there, and then the extra room because of our kid and my wife being extremely organized. It gives us an area to store all of our equipment through the winter months where we're not using it, and because we're extremely organized people, we have a place to put everything. I didn't want to just put a shed up for curb appeal and I could go down and get a shed from Home Depot, I guess, and put it there. But for what we're doing with the property, it just didn't seem correct. So I'd like to go this direction, possibly having all my equipment and the bathroom and storage area all under one roof.
Okay, so the way it's laid out, and what I think I heard you say, is that the actual utility area is what's going to house the pool equipment?
Yes.
And the other room that says open room is just for other storage?
Storage, yes, sir.
So the access point to the shed, and I'm struggling with this a little bit, there's one door that enters into the shed area, and then I guess the open side, there's a double door, it looks like a slider, which would face the pool on the east.
Yes, sir.
And then on the back side, let me see, the right, let me see how, so at the back, it looks like, you're showing just a little window in the back, but when I look at the open room, it looks like at the back that there's almost like a double wide door or something. I'm not following the construction.
So if you read front elevation east,
Correct?
on the left side, on your
that's-
left, that door goes into all the pool mechanicals. And then you have a window for the bathroom, and then the architect just put in a slider for the storage room.
But and maybe my question is, because I'm trying to figure out the why, in terms of accessing it, but at the back, which would be the rear west, it looks like there's another opening, like another door.
No, sir, just, there's a window. and
So that's showing the window?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Okay, very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for the applicant this time? Do you have a question for city staff?
Yeah,
Mr. Marvin?
no, I have a question for the applicant about the alternative site was not something that would be conducive. Putting it where it wouldn't be, it could be further away. I think it was mentioned in there, but it's a distance issue.
It was talked about in the information that I got about if it could be set on either side of the house, not in front. And that's when the rock issue, like, it's physically impossible, maybe without blasting, to bust the rock up anymore.
When you first started construction, you weren't aware of that though, were you?
No, sir.
Yeah.
And the bottom of the property is, like, we haven't found a bottom in the sand. It's so deep.
Yeah, I looked at it. I mean, I looked at your property, but,
Yes, sir.
yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a comment. I mean, based on everything that I'm seeing, this looks like it's gonna look awesome when it's done. And I would be in favor of approving this.
Well, all right. I think you can sit down. Again, Brian, we're done with this portion. We have no more questions.
Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you. That brings us to the public hearing portion of this agenda item. Is there anyone in the audience who would wish to be heard on this matter? Seeing none, let's remind folks that might be attending the meeting virtually. This is a public hearing section of agenda item number 4, and call-in number is 702-589-9629. And again, due to the delay, we'll give you about 40 seconds. Thank you. Hearing no comments, we'll close the public comment portion of this agenda item and bring it back up to the Planning Commission for deliberation. Does anyone have any comments on this matter or wish to make a motion? I do have a thought, but does anyone, I'd kind of like to hear your thoughts on the matter, kind of pros, cons, that sort of thing, before I provide my thought.
I guess I have a question for staff regarding, this would be the first time that that type of variance would be granted for that pool, for a pool. Is that correct?
If you mean because the other examples were for RV garages and carports and the like, that's true, but as the staff report notes, it's not illegal to have a pool in a front yard when it's built in. So there are other cases elsewhere in the city where pools are in front yards. Those don't necessarily have accessory buildings with them, but yes, this would be the first request in this neighborhood for a pool house in a front yard, but obviously it's related to the pool.
I guess my question is, because it's subject to a variance for a pool, and basically the underlying reason is the geology of the lot, that somehow that is something that should be perhaps tied into the approval. Because absent that, then the question is whether or not you are establishing a precedent.
Well, you can certainly amend the findings if you wish to. However, again, it's not illegal for a homeowner to have a pool in a front yard. So it sounds like the purpose of amending the findings to address the geology would be to send a message to future homeowners who will never know about this case or minutes in advance, is that if somebody puts a pool in their front yard, that at least you may not be inclined to grant a pool house in a front yard to go along with it.
Mr.
If I
Piazza?
understand it, the real variance is just for the accessory building, has nothing to do with the pool. Pool just happens to be the driver to why they have an accessory building in the front that becomes a pool house.
Yeah.
Am I? Yeah, so I think it's maybe semantics, but the real issue is just variance for the accessory building. Because there are places, I mean, I've got, even in my association, I know there's pools in the front yard.
Okay. Well, let's open it up to comments, a motion. What are your
I guess
thoughts?
the only comment, I think it was brought up by one of the, in the public comments about landscaping, and maybe this is just my not understanding it. Will the city, Susan, require a landscape plan, or is that irrelevant in this case?
No, there are no landscape requirements for the single-family zones. It's entirely up to the homeowner what they choose to do. And there is no HOA for this subdivision.
Right, okay. Okay.
Well, I think we've heard generally positive thoughts. I mean, at least not adversarial. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to conditionally approve V-22-656, subject to the findings contained on page 3 of the staff report and the conditions contained on page 4 of the report.
I'll second that.
All right, this is the last opportunity for comment. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes, or the variance passes. You're very welcome. That brings us on to item number 5. This is for possible action. This is the kind of a continuation of the discussion on potential future agenda items for training or possible topics for workshops. And this goes back to the January meeting where we provided a list, and staff, in my opinion, have done a nice job of kind of expanding, at least on the understanding of each of those items. And it looks like the request of us is to prioritize, maybe further flesh out these items. And this is not a public hearing. This is simply here on the Planning Commission. So I would ask, maybe let's kind of look at it in 2 different ways. First, does anyone have any additional items that we may have missed in the January meeting that are not included on this list? And in addition, any further, I guess, comments, amendments, if you will, to staff's write-up on each of these items? Does anyone see anything they would expand on? And then next, we'll kind of get your thoughts on what priority these may have to bring before us, and workshop versus agenda items. Does anyone see anything additional they would like to include? Seeing no response to that, does anyone care to take a stab at prioritizing?
Mr. Chairman, I would really like to see the short-term rentals be one of the first things that we talk about. I consistently get questions about that, and that could help alleviate some concerns quick.
I do agree. I'm just going to blurt out how I've kind of listed them in my own priority, and then maybe we can look at comments to my prioritization, perhaps. So what I actually thought was that variance criteria variance criteria perhaps be the first item, because we do see variances on a very regular basis. Hi, Beth. So, Beth, we're on agenda item number 5, which is the list of items that we had considered back, I think, starting in December and moving through January, and staff has written up in their report the items and kind of fleshed them out for us. So as far as priority, I thought maybe variance criteria, because we do see variances quite often, and I think we've had some questions as to truly how to look at, variances when, what truly meets the 5 criteria, how do we look at those 5 criteria, that sort of thing. So I thought maybe that would be a first item. I actually did put short-term rentals as the second priority. I did note Planning Commission procedural activities maybe as a 1A. And then moving on to tiny homes, followed by the Southern Nevada Strong Act, and then lastly master plan. But again, these are just my initial cuts. So let her rip, folks.
Mr. Chairman, just, I wonder what the commission's impression is of perhaps kicking the tiny home things up one click.
To kind of a second level.
Well, the deadline is when? 2024. So there's got to be a lot of work for that whole process, I believe.
I agree, on tiny homes. I've heard in the community, there's vocal support and vocal opposition, so it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be a controversial subject, and we should be prepared.
That does make sense. I think short-term rentals, though, may also be a somewhat controversial item, but I certainly would agree tiny homes and short-term rentals certainly are high on the priority list for me. Variance criteria still, though, is high on my list, but I'm not opposed to slipping it.
Why not, how about, the rental issue first and then the tiny home?
Well, I mean, there's also other way to look at it. In my opinion, I think variance criteria does come in there, probably at the top. But one I think we haven't talked about, but I think is also very important, all those planning commission procedural activities, I think it would be good to revisit those sooner than later. And I don't know that it's a lengthy topic, it just needs some upfront. So in my opinion, I would have that as either a 1, 2. Then I would jump over to what I call short-term or tiny homes, take your pick. And then the last two would be, of course, the Southern Nevada, and then the master plan, probably. But that would be the way I would look at it.
So what would you have, how would you have 1 and 2 again?
I'm saying I think variance in that planning commission procedural activities. I think you could do it either one. I almost think the procedural thing ought to come first and then jump into what is probably is variance. And then you can deal with the code issue, short-term, tiny home, my thought.
I certainly agree with everything I've heard. Maybe if I could just ask Mr. Mays a question. As far as the planning commission procedural activities, is that something that's almost a canned, I apologize for the use of that term, makes it seem a little too easy, but is that almost a canned presentation that you more or less have waiting? Because I'm sure you have to provide that sort of information to many of the groups that the city impanels.
Elements of it have been incorporated in introductions with planning commission members in the past, but what I would be doing is working with the city clerk and the city attorney to prepare a presentation that would highlight each of these areas and bring that to you, and I would anticipate there would be dialogue and questions. So in terms of the length of that, that depends. It depends on the number of questions the Planning Commission has. Certainly to maybe help with Planning Commission's deliberation and priorities, what we could try to do is combine that with one of the other items, maybe look at trying to schedule a separate workshop with the Planning Commission just to tackle those items. Certainly, how we can approach this once you give us guidance on priorities, when there's opportunities throughout the year where we see a relatively light agenda, there may be the opportunity with sufficient lead time for research to plug one of these into a regular meeting. But we could kick off this item with another item, like, for example, the variance criteria, as a separate workshop. And then just see how we accommodate the schedule from there.
And as another comment, just so commissioners are aware, the variance criteria are not something that you can just make up how you like. They are based on state law. So there's not going to be a lot of leeway there. Excuse me.
Well, I appreciate that, Susan. That's a good point to remember. As I look at the criteria, I think to some degree maybe additional clarification discussion as to how state law would suggest that we view each of those criteria. That clarification might help us. rather
Certainly,
than trying to overhaul the criteria.
Yeah, we could certainly provide the NRS language to you. Basically, the first 4 of our criteria are based on state law with slight, there may be, I know there's at least one slight modification there, but the 5th criteria is definitely one that decades ago the city threw in on its own.
Okay. So perhaps the NRS guidance, if the language isn't too voluminous, could be included in a package, perhaps, and we could more or less be.
It's definitely not voluminous. It's
Oh,
one of the many areas where state law doesn't provide much information.
Well, like they say, sometimes less is more. It's the question, actually, Michael, that I was driving towards was, I think we have somewhat of a consensus here that short-term rentals and tiny homes have a pretty high priority. We also, I think, feel that the procedural activities also has a fairly high priority, and maybe variance criteria to some lesser degree. What I was really wondering is how long might it take to prepare, from now to the point when you'd be ready to present on, say, tiny homes and/or short-term rentals versus procedural activities. And that's what I meant by canned, is if you already have things ready, it may not take as much research and time, and that you might be ready to present that sooner. But anyway, that's where I was going with that.
Perhaps this could help with the Planning Commission's deliberation with the issue of short-term rentals. As previously noted, Boulder City is not obligated to put in place regulations. However, the other jurisdictions in the valley are. So over the next several months, we anticipate that they are going to be looking at this issue, and that could benefit the Planning Commission with the ultimate decisions that are made by the other jurisdictions with regard to short-term rentals. Likewise, with the tiny homes issue, I do know the other jurisdictions also have the deadline of January 1st, 2024, so a little less than 2 years to put into place an ordinance addressing this. And I know that they are working on their own evaluation of this issue, and so we could collectively benefit from that research that's occurring in the valley as well. So I think to ultimately answer your question, Chairman Matuska, is it will depend on the time to research each of these items. I would recommend that we don't try to tackle short-term rentals and tiny homes at the same meeting. That's going to be a lot of work, and I think a lot of discussion on the part of the Planning Commission. I would want to break those out. But Planning Commission procedural and one of these other items we could tackle at once. So if there's a preference, either with tiny homes or short-term rental, we could tie in Planning Commission procedural items and try to schedule a workshop with the Planning Commission.
Mr. Yosky.
Comment and question. If we put it into an agenda item for a meeting, whatever item it is, does that place it open to public discussion if people had questions in the audience? Or is it just devoted to us?
It would be subject to any other agenda item where the public would have the opportunity at the beginning of the meeting to provide comment. It does not require a public hearing because, to be clear, these are workshop and/or discussions of general nature to these issues. This would not be the Planning Commission's deliberation on a text amendment.
Gotcha.
That's going to come later.
Yeah.
This is more best practices, what is occurring elsewhere in the country, the types of things that are being considered with these types of regulations.
Well, the reason I'm sort of asking the question, and you're answering it perfectly, but I'm thinking of this in terms of what items should be in meetings versus a workshop. So I think as we just go back, as we just initially talked, probably the procedural things, maybe throwing in variance at a workshop, which is a separate thing, is a good idea. But I'd say the other items lend themselves to be meeting discussions. And the only reason I say that is if I think it would be good for residents to know it's on a topic of discussion by the commission, and they could also then perhaps submit questions or something as part of their open public comment period. Not that they were acting in terms of hearing anything or whatever, but it raises the opportunity for residents to just say, hey, what about this or what about that? Or, you know, it's just a thought.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just interject, just so you know the difference, whether it's a planning commission workshop or planning commission meeting, they are agendized the same way, they go out to the public the same way, the public has the same opportunity to provide the public comment on whatever item is on there.
Okay.
The main distinction.
That's actually where I'm going with it, because it does give residents the opportunity. I just was.
Yeah, they both go out the same way.
But what I thought we were saying is a workshop could be an altogether separate meeting, or is that actually one of these?
No, it would be a separate scheduled meeting, but it would be run the same way. It would be televised, the public, it'll be noticed the same way.
Okay.
It just is not during one of the regular planning commission meetings.
Okay, so
regularly
that's,
scheduled meetings.
I'm on the same wavelength. I'm not saying it probably correctly.
And
but
so the difference is, a meeting, you can take action. A workshop, there is no action, it's
right. And
discussion.
Both of them, I'm not, yes, I understand that. Thank you. Okay.
Good points, good points. So now,
If our first task is really to just prioritize for the benefit of, I would just make a recommendation, and I'll throw it out there as I would say we want to do the procedural activities variance as a separate workshop. We do that first and do that whenever they're able to do it. And then I would move that we then create probably, and I'll go either one, short-term or tiny homes as 3-4, so to speak. And then I would do the last two being, what's that one? Southern Nevada strong, and then the master plan as the last two items.
it does sound reasonable to me. That would be my comment. I would ask staff, does the Southern Nevada Strong and our master plan discussion, are they going to be kind of interwoven? Does our master plan kind of fit within guidelines proposed within the Southern Nevada regional plan?
The Southern Nevada Strong is the regional master plan, if you will.
Okay.
It was developed later than the city's master plan. So could they be addressed at the same meeting? Possibly, but another opportunity. And again, you give us the priorities, we'll plug them in over the year as we see availability and opportunities for discussion. I could see where Southern Nevada Strong, though not a high priority, we may be able to schedule somebody representing the RTC to come in and present on that at a regular meeting, so that you would get a presentation, a better understanding of the plan, and be able to ask questions. And so that may be able to be plugged in during a regular meeting. But with the priorities that you provide tonight, we'll focus on the research and scheduling. It will give us the direction on which ones to tackle first.
Very good. So hearing that, it seems as though Southern Nevada Strong might might be prudent for us to put that ahead of our master plan, just so that we kind of see where that would guide. But really, it sounds like we're all kind of the same opinion that tiny homes has a high priority, short-term rentals perhaps a little bit lower priority. I do tend to agree that the procedural activities and variance may be something that we want to hit pretty quickly while they're researching tiny homes and the other. So I guess I'm really in agreement, Ernie, with your thoughts. Those might be 1A, or 1 and 2, tiny homes 3, short-term rentals 4, strong 5, master plan 6. If I have hit all of them, does anyone have a difference?
Not necessarily different. I was going to pick up on what Ernie said and ask Mike, if it was a procedural workshop, what would be a realistic time frame now to schedule that?
It'll be dependent on working with the city clerk and the city attorney on preparing the presentation and subject to the planning commission availability. And it could be, if we don't have anything on the agenda for March, that could be the primary item for March. So I think, again, give us the priorities, and then we will plug them in as availability presents itself. And certainly when we see these items being a very lengthy one in terms of presentation and discussion with the Planning Commission, that's when we're going to try to schedule a workshop separate from the Planning Commission meeting, because we certainly want to be sensitive to your time and not make for a very lengthy meeting.
So I guess I could deduce that a month's lead time would work for that, the original procedural one. If you're saying right now, if we didn't have anything for business in March, then we could do it in March.
I would shoot for that, but again, need to work with the city attorney and the city clerk on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
This discussion about workshop versus meeting, it raises a question that I'd like to just kind of get some feedback from the rest of the commission. What is your preference? Would you prefer to have a somewhat longer meeting if we can fit, regularly scheduled planning commission meeting, if we can fit 1 or 2 of these items in, or an entirely separate workshop? I realize city staff is trying to be sensitive to our needs, and I just thought it might not hurt for them to hear what our desires really are. In other words, would you like to dedicate another block of time, as in a separate workshop, or would you prefer a slightly longer meeting duration to cover one of these? What are your thoughts?
I always like to speak up. I personally like the idea of the workshop separate session.
Okay.
I don't like to be time limited for something like that. I think as long as we have all the topics, we want to limit it. I don't think we should do all day, but if you want a couple hours, I think it would be good to just dedicate it. I think the other ones, which is where I was going, most of the other ones lend themselves to a meeting here where public can provide their input, if you will, like within the allowable. Not that there's any deliberations or actions. So that's why I would support a separate one workshop for Planning Commission procedural, and I think variance criteria lends itself into that one. I think the others then just go, kind of in the same, priority. Those are 1 and 2. Then I go back to short term, the tiny homes, 3-4, 4-3, whatever, and then strong, that is strong and master plan, the last 2.
Does that seem to kind of be the opinion of everyone here? Speak up if you have a different thought. Beth?
I think if we have a meeting like March, if there's nothing on the agenda, we could utilize that time. That would be my preference first, but, I wouldn't, I wouldn't want to keep staff, my concern would be keeping staff here after they've been here all day. If we can fit it in with enough notice, people can make arrangements to be here for a workshop. That'd be fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone have a different opinion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd personally rather come back a second day a month than stay till 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Very good. I think we have consensus here that most of us would rather have a meeting, and if it's going to be a workshop that's going to take an hour or more, it sounds like a separate workshop is what folks would prefer to see. If it's something we can squeeze into the agenda, that seems to work. If I'm speaking correct, for the group. And does anyone disagree with the priorities that we've laid out? Planning Commission and Variance would be one. Procedural activities, Variance would be one. 2 would be tiny homes, 3 short-term rentals. Well, yeah, so I combined one, but anyway, you know what I'm saying. Then Southern Nevada Strong, followed by Master Plan. Does that seem reasonable? Then that would be our recommendation to you all.
Great, thank you very much. We will work on this and keep the Planning Commission up to date on our efforts to bring these topics to you for discussion.
Awesome. I think that closes that agenda item, which brings us to number 6, the monthly progress report on development allotments.
No comment.
That's a good one. And lastly, any final public comment? And let's see. I guess we open it up to anyone who may be watching virtually or participating virtually. The number, once again, is 702-589-9629. Please call in as soon as possible, and we'll give you some time to the phone.
Unless that means, right now, we allow up to 5 minutes per person. Oh, they don't have the choice to change that.
All right, hearing no comments, we'll close the final comment period of this meeting and bring this meeting to a close. Thank you all very much. City staff, thank you so much for the work you've done on this.
Okay.